Neuvillette is finally back in the second half of version 6.3, and even after 2 years, he's arguably still the best DPS in the entire game. In this guide, we'll break down his current place in the meta and explain why he has aged so well, go over his talents, rotations, and gameplay tips, and take a look at his current build, new weapon options, and the large pool of amazing teams he has collected over the years.
Hello, welcome to Genshin Filter, your quick guide for everything Genshin. So let's get started!
Columbina is finally here, and if you want to save money on wishes, let me share with you the method I've been personally using for a long time. Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a safe, secure, and reliable way to top up Genesis crystals, with up to 25% off compared to in-game prices. Don't miss Loot Bar's new moon event. Every spin is a 100% guaranteed win. You can score massive discounts, free monthly cards, or the grand prize, a guaranteed Columbina bundle worth $365, and get spins by sharing and buying in the site. The process is super simple. Choose the deal you want, enter your UID and server, and you are done. It's 100% safe and delivered just under 30 minutes. And yes, PlayStation and Xbox players can use it too. Loot Bar also supports other games like Honkai Star Rail and Withering Waves, so hit the link in the description or pin comment to try it yourself and start saving. And thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring this video. Before Neuvillette's release 2 years ago, Genshin Impact was one of the most balanced gacha games on the market. Unlike most gacha games that constantly push power creep to generate hype and spending, Genshin focused on characters with clear niches and unique strengths for a full 3 years, which added a lot to its incredible success. Then everything changed when Neuvillette was released. His release marked the first real instance of power creep in Genshin Impact. He immediately established himself as the strongest and best DPS in the game, far surpassing others in both raw strength and ease of use, and completely power creeping Ayato in all of his best teams. Before Neuvillette, characters like Ayato were considered great pulls. He was a true jack of all trades, master of none, and back then versatile characters were a great long-term investment for any account. But that mindset no longer holds. Since Fontaine, the game has slowly shifted towards specific best-in-slot teammates, like Escoffier and Chevreuse, instead of flexible replacements, as versatile characters usually have their versatility balanced with lower damage output, which eventually leads to irrelevancy. Just one patch after Neuvillette's release, he received Furina, his best companion, and at the time, the best support in the game. That pairing effectively broke the game in half, and since then, almost every new support that was released consistently gave Neuvillette stronger or at least highly competitive teams, making him even more versatile over time. Today, power creep has gotten out of proportion with the release of Mavuika, Skirk, and the Not Cry DPS characters. And Neuvillette, with all the new teams he has gained, has become what Ayato once was, a master of all trades. But unlike Ayato, his damage has remained relevant, and because of that, he is still the master of many of those trades. Playing Neuvillette today feels similar to using Zhongli in the early Abyss days. He fit into every team, and provided so much comfort and survivability that Abyss runs were often faster simply because you didn't need to worry about dodging. Neuvillette strongly reminds me of that experience, but in his own way. When playing the strongest DPS characters today, you often need to compensate for their damage with precise combos, dodging, and reaction management, which you can count as a skill issue. But with Neuvillette, it just feels like switching the game to easy mode. Even though he's no longer the absolute strongest DPS, he still clears almost all content quickly, tanks nearly everything with his high HP and self-healing, and removes the need to worry about rotations, reactions, or AoE. He can even reach enemies that even the strongest carries find hard to reach. All of that, together with his massive pool of viable teams, compensates for his lower damage, to the point where he can a lot of times even outperform the strongest DPS characters in real gameplay. And that is why for me, he is still the true best DPS in the game. That being said, his longevity is the issue here, as his value depends on his damage remaining relevant, and for now it still is. If that ever changes, and Hoyoverse keeps raising the damage of new characters, he may eventually join Ayato as a versatile Hydro character that just can't get the job done. His simple gameplay can also be a downside for players who enjoy complex mechanics, but personally I love it. Playing Neuvillette feels powerful, almost godlike, as if you're using cheat codes. His kit feels fundamentally broken, and the developers proved that when they attempted to nerf him and quickly realized they couldn't do it at this point. Instead, they tried to balance the game around him, and I genuinely believe that is one of the reasons for the massive flood of power creep in the recent regions. Neuvillette is a 5-star Hydro Catalyst user who ascends with crit damage, and his main playstyle is as an on-field Hydro main DPS that focuses on dealing very high charge attack damage that scales of HP. His normal attacks are not relevant to his playstyle and are very weak hydro-infused hits, which is expected from him being a catalyst user. His charged attacks are the main part of his kit. If you simply hold and release, he will fire a fast beam that deals low damage, as both this and his normals scale from attack. But if you keep holding the charged attack button, that's where the magic happens. Neuvillette will start charging his attack, which you can see by the circle forming around his hand. After 6 seconds, the attack releases into a massive hydro beam for 3 seconds that deals very high damage to anything caught in its path. The beam also passes through enemies and even constructs. If Neuvillette's HP is above 50%, he will continuously lose 8% HP every 0.5 seconds while the beam is active, for a total of 48% HP. This 6-second charge time and 48% HP loss might sound bad, and that's where his source water droplets come into play. These droplets are created by using his skill and burst, or by other characters like the Hydro Traveler or Sijowin. However, playing those characters with Neuvillette is always a DPS loss, and you should generally avoid pairing them together. If there are any source water droplets around Neuvillette when he starts charging his beam, the droplets will be absorbed to speed up the charging time of his charged attack. Each droplet absorbed speeds up the charge time by 2 seconds, and also recovers 16% of his HP. If he absorbs 3 droplets, the beam will be released instantly, and recover 48% HP, which combined with his high HP, gives him extremely high survivability. The droplets will also remain on the field for 15 seconds, even when you swap off Neuvillette, giving him a lot of freedom in his rotations. While charging the beam or during the beam itself, Neuvillette rises above the ground and slowly glides, allowing you to reposition him freely to avoid incoming attacks. The beam has a very long range, which you can see with a range indicator on the ground, and you can aim it with either a controller or mouse in any direction you're looking, including up and down. What makes this beam so broken is that the aiming speed does not slow down while the beam is active. This allows you to literally scan the entire screen by quickly aiming left and right. You can even spin around and hit every enemy around you with almost no damage loss. This makes it feel like a complete cheat code. The developers clearly thought so as well, since they tried to nerf it by slowing the aim speed a few versions ago. But the backlash from the community was so strong that they immediately reverted the change. All of this makes Neuvillette hands down the best AoE DPS in the game, while still being a very strong DPS against single target enemies. His elemental skill deals nice AoE hydro damage to enemies in front of him based on his HP, with a 12-second cooldown, and applies a Pneuma-aligned hit that can stun Fontaine enemies with Osea alignment. The most important part of his skill, however, is that it generates 3 source water droplets when it hits an enemy. His elemental burst deals 3 instances of AoE hydro damage based on his HP, has an 18-second cooldown, and costs 70 energy. The burst also generates 6 source water droplets on cast, without needing to hit an enemy. That, alongside his skill, gives him up to 9 source water droplets for 3 charge attacks. Thanks to his skill's relatively short cooldown, with the right rotation you can generate up to 12 droplets for a total of 4 charge attacks, which we'll cover how to do in the next section. His Ascension 1 passive gives him a stack for 30 seconds for each different hydro-related reaction triggered by anyone on the team, up to a maximum of 3 stacks. Each stack increases the base damage of his beam by 110, 125 and 160% respectively. The jump between the second and third stack is quite large, which incentivizes building teams with multiple different elements to fully maximize this buff. You can see how many stacks you have by the mark above the active character's head when a new hydro reaction is triggered, or when swapping back to Neuvillette, as his cloak and hair will also glow when having 3 stacks. His Ascension 4 passive grants Neuvillette up to 30% hydro damage bonus for every 1% HP above 30%. This means you want to keep Neuvillette healthy, which is easy thanks to his strong self-healing. However, since he also drains his own HP during his charge attacks, this buff will slowly decrease over time, making an additional healer a good option to maintain it. His Overworld passive increases underwater swimming speed for the entire team by 15%. For talent priority, you want to focus primarily on his normal and charge attack talent, as this is where the vast majority of his damage comes from. After that, you can level his burst and skill for some additional damage. For rotations, to get as many charged attack beams as possible, you want to start with Neuvillette's skill. If you have Furina on the team, you want to swap to her immediately after and use her burst so she can catch Neuvillette's skill particles. Then rotate through the rest of your team's abilities, triggering as many different hydro reactions as possible to max his A1 buff. After that, swap back to Neuvillette and immediately use his beam before the droplets disappear. Next, use both his skill and burst to generate 9 more source water droplets. Make sure to hit an enemy with the skill, or it will not generate any droplets. Then use his beam 3 times to absorb all the droplets. By that time, his skill will be ready again, allowing you to repeat the rotation. If the enemies are about to die after the 4th beam, instead of using the skill and swapping off to start a full rotation, you can immediately use his skill droplets for a 5th charged attack. If you play his freeze team with Citlali, make sure to swap to her right after Furina, so she can proc the Cinder City set buff. Otherwise it can be quite hard to proc with Escoffier skill on the field. As you can see, his rotations can get quite long thanks to his very flexible access to droplets. By the time Neuvillette finishes his 2nd charge attack, some team buffs like Kazuha damage percent buff and Viridescent Venerer may expire. Thanks to the fact that droplets don't disappear when you swap off Neuvillette, he has a lot of flexibility to swap back to specific supports to reapply buffs, then return to Neuvillette to finish the rest of his charge attacks. The droplets have a very large absorption range, but it is cone-shaped in front of Neuvillette, so make sure you're facing the direction of the droplets you want to absorb when charging his beam. After fully charging the beam, you no longer need to hold the attack button, and you can even make the beam activate faster. By holding the attack button and then releasing quickly, the beam will fire instantly. However, you have to make sure you have 3 droplets in front of you, or you'll miss fire and waste the water droplets. While firing his beam, make sure to glide around to avoid enemy attacks, as Neuvillette can be knocked out of his charge attacks. If that happens, the droplets will be wasted, so you usually want to run him with a shielder, unless you have his C1, but we will go over that in the team section. To cancel a beam if you are about to get hit and can't glide away, you can simply dodge, which will immediately stop it. You can rapidly aim left and right in a small cone to hit all enemies, or spin around to hit everything around you with very little damage loss. This usually works better with a mouse. To do this efficiently, you don't need to slide your mouse across the entire desk. Just a wider left to right movement is enough to achieve the same effect. His signature weapon, Tomb of the Eternal Flow, is his best in slot. It has low base attack and provides 88% crit damage. Its effect increases his HP by 16%, and when the wielder's HP increases or decreases, their charged attack damage is increased by 14% for 4 seconds, stacking up to 3 times for a total of 42% charged attack damage. When you have 3 stacks, the wielder regenerates 8 energy every 12 seconds. If you play him in a Lunar reaction team, Columbina's weapon is extremely strong on him and can even compete with his signature. Otherwise, any catalyst with crit rate or crit damage is a great alternative, especially ones that also provide crit, HP, charge attack damage, or even ER bonuses in their effects. For free-to-play, Ballad of the Boundless Blue is an excellent choice for both charge attack damage and ER. Wave Riding Whirl is another solid option that gives a large amount of energy and HP, and Prototype Amber is also a great option, providing both HP and energy. His best artifact set by far is the 4-piece Marechaussee Hunter, which gives him 15% charge attack damage and 36% crit rate. If you have Furina, this artifact domain also becomes very resin efficient to farm. For main stats, on the Sands, go with HP. On the Goblet, you can choose either Hydro damage bonus or HP, depending on your weapon and how much of each stat your team provides. If you're getting a lot of elemental damage buffs from other sources, like Kazuha for example, go for HP and vice versa. On the Circlet, go with crit damage or crit rate. Since you get a large amount of crit rate from the artifact set, you'll usually want to go with a crit damage circlet to avoid overcapping, especially if you're using a crit rate weapon. For substats, make sure you have enough ER to burst consistently. Around 130 ER is a good target, and it can also go much lower if you use Furina or his signature. Then prioritize crit rate and crit damage, followed by HP percent and flat HP, aiming for around 40,000 HP, and some elemental mastery can also be valuable. When it comes to Neuvillette's teams, over the years, almost every support that was released ended up being either a buff to his teams, or at least a very competitive option. So let's break it down. When building a good Neuvillette team, you usually want 2 things. A shielder to make sure you don't get knocked out of his charge attacks, and non-hydro characters on the team so you can trigger 3 different hydro-related reactions and fully stack his A1 passive. At release, the best team that met these requirements was Fischl, Kazuha and Zhongli, which to this day is still a solid team. And something that was really cool with Kazuha is that he could collect all the droplets with his skill, making it much easier to absorb. Then Furina released and immediately became his dedicated support, even though the synergy wasn't perfect, since she is a hydro character and caused him to lose one of his A1 stacks, resulting in a noticeable damage loss. But the damage he gained from her buffs and the hydro resonance HP bonus more than made up for it. If you invested in his C1, it essentially solved all of his team weaknesses. It made his synergy with Furina perfect by allowing him to fully stack his A1, even with her on the team, while also removing the need for a shielder, thanks to the added interruption resistance. But we'll go deeper into his C1 and its current value in the Constellations section. His self-healing allows him to function as the only healer on the team, letting you run strong buffers or sub-DPS units instead. This is a huge advantage over other DPS characters who are forced to dedicate a team slot to a healer just to stay alive. This self-healing was also strong enough for him to fully stack Furina's buff on his own, and back when the Abyss was weaker, you could even see players soloing floor 12 with Neuvillette, which was both impressive and fun to play. After that, Emily released as a solid option for Vaporize teams alongside Xiangling. Then Silonen arrived and provided a massive upgrade to his teams, one that was worth giving up a shielder for, especially if you had his C1. After that, Escoffier released and brought Freeze back into the meta. Together with Citlali, they created another team that was highly competitive with the Shilon and Kazuha team, but this time with both a dedicated team-wide healer and a dedicated shielder, making the team feel much safer and more complete. This was also the point where his teams began shifting away from pure hypercarry playstyles, toward more split damage setups, thanks to the strong sub-DPS units being introduced. Then we got Ineffa, who brought Electro-Charged back into the meta with the new Lunar charged reaction and provided a shield. The team truly came together a patch later with the release of Lauma, forming a strong Quick Bloom team. After that, Durin was released, enhancing Vaporize teams as a strong replacement for Xiangling and off-field Mavuika, while also introducing the Hex and Zircle units. And now, with Columbina, the Lunar team is finally complete, replacing Furina on Neuvillette's teams for the first time. And with that, freeing up Furina for the other side, which can be amazing for any account, especially if you have Skirk. All of these teams are very competitive with each other, and that's how I would personally rank them from best to worst. What's truly impressive is that there is no other carries in the game with this many great teams, that are all competitive with each other and are that relevant in the meta. Now let's quickly break down his constellations, to see if they're worth investing in compared to his signature weapon. C1 gives Neuvillette 1 stack of his A1 buff while he is on field. This means you now only need 2 different Hydro-related reactions to fully max the buff, allowing you to run another Hydro character like Furina to gain both her powerful buffs and Hydro resonance. Additionally, while Neuvillette is firing his beam, he gains very strong interruption resistance, meaning you no longer need to run a shielder, or worry about getting knocked out of his charged attacks. Altogether, this is a massive quality of life constellation that solves most of his weaknesses at once. C2 gives him up to 42% crit damage when he has 3 stacks of his A4 passive, since he scales extremely well with crit. This is a very strong damage increase. C3 increases his normal and charged attack talent levels, which is a very solid damage boost. C4 generates 1 source water droplet every 4 seconds when Neuvillette is healed. This constellation is only really relevant if you plan to go for C6. C5 increases his burst talent level, which results in a relatively small damage increase. C6 is a very powerful and flashy constellation. Neuvillette can now absorb source water droplets while firing his beam without stopping to recharge, and each droplet absorbed extends the beam duration by 1 second, until no droplets remain on the field. This is where C4 becomes important, as it generates additional droplets to further extend the beam duration. Additionally, every 2 seconds, 2 extra smaller beams fire from each side, each dealing 10% of Neuvillette's HP as Hydro damage. Neuvillette is already an amazing DPS at C0, and back when he released, his C1 was an insane quality of life upgrade that I would have recommended without hesitation. Today, however, it really depends on how you play him. If you mostly play him in his new best teams, like Freeze with Citlali or Lunar Quick Bloom with Ineffa, then honestly his C1 doesn't really do much for him, and going for his weapon is much better. Especially with these coming banners, the weapon banners are for sure looking much better. But if you don't have a shield on his teams, then like I said, his C1 solves all his weaknesses for an incredible quality of life and damage increase. And in that case, it is a really great pick. After all this time, Neuvillette is still one of the few characters in the game that feel different. Not just strong or comfortable, but fundamentally broken in how his kit was designed as a whole. In a way that even stronger DPS units don't manage to replicate in terms of presence and aura. Is he going to stay the absolute best DPS forever? Probably not. Genshin has clearly entered a phase where raw DPS numbers keep going up, and newer characters will always push higher ceilings. But the reason I still recommend Neuvillette isn't because of peak damage, it's because of how relevant his kit remains no matter how much the meta shifts. And the last 2 years have proven it with buff after buff to his teams. That said, Neuvillette isn't for everyone. His gameplay is very simple, and if you enjoy complex rotation, tight execution, or reaction-heavy playstyle, you might find him straight up boring. But if you enjoy feeling unstoppable, deleting content with minimal effort, and having a character that works in almost any situation with a wide variety of teams, I would argue that Neuvillette delivers that better than anyone else in the game.
And if you enjoy his playstyle, I don't think you would regret getting him. And that's a wrap. If this video helps you in any way, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more filter guides. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!